As Marissa stood in my office pleading for financial help, her voice trembled. "Alex, they're your kids too." "They deserve your support." I leaned back, my expression cold, and replied, "The trust funds I set up for them are secure, untouchable by you or Bruce. You've taken enough." Her face paled as she realized that the power she once wielded over me was gone, replaced by a man who had built an empire and refused to be manipulated ever again. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next tales. Millbrook was the kind of town where life moved at a deliberate pace. Nestled among rolling hills and lined with Victorian-style homes, its streets were dotted with cozy cafes and a single bookshop that doubled as a community hub. The crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, a hallmark of its small-town charm. It was a place where neighbors waved from porches, children played under oak trees, and families gathered for Friday night football games. Alexander Hood, a 42-year-old software developer, embodied the quiet dependability that defined the town. With his wire-rimmed glasses and a touch of gray at his temples, Alex's unassuming demeanor masked a sharp intellect. He adored his wife Marissa, a pediatrician, and their 3 children, Thomas, Emma, and Lucas. Their family life seemed perfect. Warm dinners, laughter-filled weekends, and a home steeped in love. Late one evening, Alex worked in his home office, the rhythmic clicking of his keyboard blending with the soft hum of his dual monitors. The clock read 11:47 p.m. His desk bore signs of a life well lived, a coffee-stained world's best dad mug, and a photo of his smiling family. Then came Marissa's laughter from the garden. It was followed by words that froze Alex mid-typing, turning the piece of his life into fragile glass. "Can you believe he still has no clue?" For a moment, Alex couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, turning the familiar warmth of his home into a suffocating void. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk, his mind replaying Marissa's voice. "Can you believe he still has no clue?" Disbelief surged through him like a tidal wave, crashing against the foundation of trust he had built over 15 years. The quiet hum of his office now felt mocking, each keystroke of his computer a hollow echo in the room. Memories he had cherished began to resurface, now tinged with suspicion. Thomas's crinkled eyes when he laughed. He had always thought they looked nothing like his own. Emma's auburn hair, so unlike either his or Marissa's. Lucas's uncanny knack for numbers, a talent he had chalked up to genetics, now seemed cruelly misplaced. Each recollection was another blow, unraveling the narrative he had believed in with all his heart. Then there was Bruce Cumans. His name now carried a weight that threatened to crush Alex. Images of Bruce holding Lucas at his baptism, advising his mother on investments, and standing as best man at his wedding flickered in Alex's mind. How many times had Alex laughed alongside him, shared a drink, trusted him with his family? The betrayal felt infinite, spiraling deeper as the realization settled that this had not been an impulsive mistake, but a meticulously orchestrated deception. And his mother, Caroline, her involvement was the final dagger. She had been his constant, the one who had shaped his moral compass, yet her complicity now stained every memory of her care and wisdom. Sinking into his chair, Alex buried his face in his hands. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it unraveled his very sense of self. How could he trust his own judgment, his own memories? The life he thought he had built was no longer his. It was someone else's script, and he had been a fool to believe it was real. The decision to hire Jared Glover wasn't easy. Alex had always prided himself on his independence, on his ability to solve problems without outside help. But as he sat in the dimly lit corner of a coffee shop 2 towns over, watching Glover methodically take notes on a sleek tablet, he realized this was a situation far beyond his capacity to untangle alone. Glover, a private investigator with sharp eyes and a reputation for uncovering the truth, exuded quiet professionalism. "Leave nothing out," Glover instructed, his voice low and deliberate. Alex recounted every detail of the betrayal he had overheard, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. Glover nodded, asking precise questions, then assured Alex he would begin immediately. Days later, the first report arrived, sealed in an envelope with Glover's practiced efficiency. Alex hesitated before opening it, a knot tightening in his stomach. Inside were the results of DNA tests conducted on his children. The clinical language and stark percentages painted an undeniable picture. Thomas, Emma, and Lucas shared no genetic connection to him. Instead, they were a perfect match with Bruce Cummins. Alex stared at the results for what felt like hours, his vision blurring as the words seared into his mind. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Everything he thought he had passed on, every trait he took pride in nurturing, had come from someone else. The next breakthrough came when Glover unearthed a series of suspicious financial transactions. Cross-referencing bank statements, he showed Alex how Bruce and Marissa had funneled money into offshore accounts over the years. Each transfer was cleverly disguised as routine expenses, joint vacation funds, medical reimbursements, or even investment profits from Bruce's advisory firm. The amounts were staggering, far beyond what Alex thought their household expenses could justify. Glover laid out the documents during their second meeting, sliding them across the table one by one. "This account," Glover said, tapping a spreadsheet with his pen, "is under your wife's name, but it's tied to Bruce's shell company. They've been using your family finances to cover their retreats. Caroline's beach house, mostly." The mention of his mother's beach house struck a nerve. Alex had always thought of the property as a serene getaway, a place where his mother held family gatherings and planned charitable events. Now it was sullied, another stage for their deception. "Here's the utility data," Glover continued. "Power usage spikes on weekends you were out of town, exactly when Bruce and Marissa claimed they were busy with work obligations." Alex felt his pulse quicken. He had always trusted Marissa's hospital emergencies and Bruce's business trips without question. Now, he could see how these alibis had shielded their affair. The betrayal deepened with every line of the report, each piece of evidence chiseling away at the foundation of his reality. The final and most devastating discovery came through emails. Glover's tech specialist had combed through Caroline's archived correspondence, finding exchanges with Marissa that dated back more than a decade. Reading the emails, Alex felt a mix of nausea and rage. His own mother, the woman he had trusted above all others, had orchestrated the relationship between Marissa and Bruce. In one email, sent weeks before Alex's wedding, Caroline wrote, "Bruce is the better match, dear. Alex is stable, successful, and completely devoted to you. This way you can have everything, Alex's security and Bruce's passion. Trust me, this is for the best." Her tone was disturbingly casual, as though she were coordinating a dinner party rather than a conspiracy that would dismantle her son's life. Another exchange detailed Caroline's role in keeping the affair hidden. She had not only encouraged Marissa, but also coordinated excuses for her absences, even offering to watch the children during their illicit weekends. Alex's hands trembled as he read, his mother's betrayal feeling almost more personal than Marissa's. She had chosen someone else's happiness over his, believing herself to be acting in his best interest. Each piece of evidence Glover uncovered painted a clearer picture of the deceit that had woven itself into Alex's life. He began to see patterns he had missed before: Marissa's carefully timed hospital calls, Bruce's frequent and overly casual drop-ins, Caroline's oddly defensive reactions whenever he questioned family matters. The web of lies was intricate, spanning years and involving the people Alex had trusted most. With every revelation, the weight on Alex's shoulders grew heavier. Yet, alongside the pain and anger, a sense of determination began to take root. If Marissa, Bruce, and even Caroline had built this elaborate facade, then he would dismantle it with equal precision. By the time he left Glover's office that day, Alex wasn't just a broken man. He was a man with a plan. As he drove home, the evidence in his briefcase felt like a ticking bomb. He knew he couldn't confront them yet, not until he was ready. The truth had torn his life apart, but Alex vowed it would also be the tool he used to rebuild it on his terms. The storm had begun, and Alex was no longer the unsuspecting victim. He was becoming something sharper, stronger, and far more dangerous to those who had betrayed him. We open now with Alex's map, which shows the different kinds of worlds he can travel to. Residents of each world. Alex sat across from Miranda Hughes in her sleek, minimalist office, her reputation as a relentless attorney preceding her. The room's quiet gravitas mirrored her sharp, no-nonsense demeanor, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in Alex's life. He slid the thick folder across her desk. Documents, reports, and Glover's meticulously compiled evidence. Miranda flipped through the pages, her movements deliberate, her brow furrowing as she pieced together the enormity of what had unfolded. "This," she finally said, leaning back and adjusting her glasses, "isn't just betrayal. It's a systematic dismantling of trust and assets. If we handle this right, we can ensure they have no way out." Alex nodded, the tension in his jaw betraying the calm he tried to project. "I don't just want justice," he replied, his voice steady. "I want to ensure my children are protected, no matter what." Miranda's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "Then we start with your assets." The first order of business was to shield Alex's finances from any potential claims. Miranda brought in Gustavo Goodrich, a seasoned financial advisor specializing in complex asset management. Sitting at Miranda's conference table, Alex listened as Gustavo laid out a plan to safeguard his wealth. "We'll create layers," Gustavo explained, pulling up a digital diagram on his tablet. "Trusts, offshore accounts, and blind investments. Each move will be entirely legal, but it'll make accessing your assets nearly impossible for anyone else." Alex approved the plan without hesitation, understanding the importance of protecting what he had built, not for himself, but for the future of his children. Gustavo worked quickly, establishing independent trust funds for Thomas, Emma, and Lucas. These funds were structured with ironclad terms. No one but the children could access them, and only under specific conditions, such as educational expenses or significant milestones. "Their financial futures will be secure," Gustavo assured him, "and neither Marissa nor Bruce will ever be able to touch these funds." Even as these preparations unfolded, Alex maintained the illusion of normalcy at home. Each morning, he kissed Marissa on the cheek before she left for work, her hospital bag slung casually over her shoulder. Each evening, he helped the children with homework, shared family dinners, and told bedtime stories. Every interaction was a carefully rehearsed performance, designed to buy him time. Yet behind the scenes, Alex's life had become a flurry of quiet activity. He scheduled meetings with his legal and financial teams during hours when Marissa believed he was at work. He carefully deleted phone records and emails after every correspondence with Miranda or Gustavo, ensuring no trace of his plans could be found. The hardest part was sitting across from Marissa at the dinner table, listening to her recount mundane hospital anecdotes while knowing she was living a double life. Occasionally, his gaze would linger on her, searching for a flicker of guilt, a crack in her facade. But Marissa played her part as flawlessly as he did, and the silence between them became a battleground neither was willing to acknowledge. Meanwhile, Miranda's team worked tirelessly to compile an airtight case. Surveillance photos, email records, financial statements, and DNA tests were organized into a comprehensive dossier. The legal strategy was clear. Confront Marissa and Bruce with overwhelming evidence, leaving them no room to maneuver. "Timing is everything," Miranda advised during one late-night meeting. "We'll hit them when they least expect it. This isn't just about exposing the truth, it's about controlling the narrative." Alex appreciated her precision. Every step was calculated, from when to file for divorce to how to secure the house and other joint assets. His company was restructured quietly, with shares transferred into blind trusts to prevent Marissa from claiming estate. Despite the meticulous planning, Alex's emotions often threatened to overwhelm him. Late at night, in the solitude of his office, he would stare at family photos, the smiling faces of Thomas, Emma, and Lucas, a reminder of why he couldn't falter. His love for them remained unshaken, even as he grappled with the reality of their parentage. In those moments, he resolved to stay strong, not for revenge, but for their futures. They deserve stability, security, and the opportunity to grow without the shadow of their parents' deceit looming over them. And they deserve to be seen and heard by the people, including Stefka. As the weeks passed, Alex perfected the delicate balance between preparation and pretense. The groundwork was laid, the trusts were funded, the evidence was prepared, and Miranda's strategy was ready to deploy. Yet, on the surface, life in the Hood household remained unchanged. Marissa continued her charade, Bruce attended family events with his usual charm, and Caroline stopped by with baked goods, her conspiratorial smile masking the depth of her betrayal. Alex greeted them all with quiet composure, his true intentions hidden behind an impenetrable mask. But beneath the calm exterior, the storm was building. Alex's world had been shattered, but he was determined to rebuild it, not as the trusting husband he once was, but as a man ready to expose the lies that had defined his life for far too long. The pieces were in place, and the moment of reckoning was drawing closer. The evenings were the hardest for Alex. The hours spent at the dinner table, in the living room, or beside his children's beds were both his greatest solace and his deepest torment. He loved them fiercely. Thomas with his boundless curiosity, Emma with her quiet grace, and Lucas with his unrelenting enthusiasm for learning. Yet every moment was tinged with a cruel reality. They were not his, not by blood. The thought gnawed at him, but it never diminished the warmth he felt in their presence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex sat beside Lucas at the kitchen table. The boy was struggling with fractions, his small hands clutching a pencil as he frowned at the workbook. "Here," Alex said gently, taking the pencil and sketching out a visual diagram. "Think of it like pizza slices. If we divide the whole pie into 8 pieces, but you eat 3, how many are left?" Lucas's face lit up with understanding. "5, he exclaimed, his grin wide. Alex couldn't help but smile back, pride welling in his chest. "Exactly," he said, ruffling Lucas's hair. "You've got it." But as the boy turned back to his workbook, Alex's smile faltered. He saw Bruce's eyes and Lucas's delighted expression, a reminder that the bond he cherished was rooted in a lie. The betrayal wrapped itself around the moment like a shadow, making the warmth feel fleeting, almost borrowed. Later that night, Alex lingered outside Emma's room as the sound of her violin drifted through the closed door. She was practicing a piece he didn't recognize, the melody haunting and melancholic. He had always been proud of her dedication, the way she poured her emotions into every note. But now, as he listened, he wondered, was her passion for music something she had inherited from Bruce, or was it a gift uniquely her own? He wanted to believe it didn't matter, that nurture had more weight than nature. Yet, the question lingered, an unwelcome guest in his mind. He had raised her, encouraged her, supported her. Was that not enough to make her his? The answers eluded him, leaving only a hollow ache. Thomas, the eldest, was another source of both pride and pain. At 14, he was growing into a young man with a confidence that Alex envied. One evening, after dinner, Thomas had approached him with a soccer strategy he had been working on for his team. "Dad, look," he said, spreading the hand-drawn diagram across the coffee table. "If we shift the midfielders this way during defense, we can block their counterattacks better." Alex studied the diagram, nodding with approval. "That's smart," he said. "You're thinking ahead, anticipating their moves. Your coach will be impressed." Thomas beamed, his excitement infectious. But as Alex watched him, the familiar crinkle in his eyes stirred a pang of grief. It was Bruce's expression, not his. The realization hit like a physical blow, making it hard to meet Thomas's gaze. He forced a smile, praising his son's creativity, but the weight of the truth lingered. In quieter moments, when the house was still, Alex often retreated to his office. There, he would stare at family photos, snapshots of birthday parties, vacations, and ordinary days that had once felt perfect. He studied their faces, searching for pieces of himself in them and coming up empty. The photos became artifacts of a life he had believed in but no longer recognized. Despite the pain, Alex couldn't bring himself to pull away from the children. They were innocent in all of this, victims of circumstances beyond their control. He couldn't punish them for the choices of their mother or Bruce, nor could he let his own anguish color his interactions with them. Instead, he channeled his love into ensuring their futures would be secure. The trust funds were more than financial safety nets. They were Alex's promise to them, a way to provide for their dreams regardless of what came next. He took solace in the knowledge that, no matter how the truth unraveled, they would have the opportunities they deserved. This was the final proof that they were on the right path. Yet, even as he worked to protect them, the emotional toll weighed heavily. He questioned everything: his role as a father, the authenticity of his love, and whether the children would one day view him as a stranger. The uncertainty was suffocating, but it never extinguished the love that anchored him. After all, one night, Lucas approached him while he was working. "Dad," he said, holding up a drawing he had made, a simple sketch of their family, complete with their dog Max. "I made this for you." Alex took the drawing, his throat tightening as he studied it. He was there, at the center, drawn with exaggerated glasses and a big smile. "Thanks, buddy," he managed, pulling Lucas into a hug. In that moment, Alex realized something profound. Love, real love, wasn't dictated by DNA. It was built in moments like this. Helping with homework, listening to violin practice, and sharing in his children's dreams. The betrayal couldn't erase what he felt for them, nor could it diminish the role he had played in their lives. The pain of the deception was real, but so was his love. And in the end, that love gave him strength. It wasn't about reclaiming what he had lost. It was about holding on to what truly mattered, even in the face of unimaginable betrayal. The morning of Thanksgiving dawned crisp and cold, the frost on the windows reflecting the tension simmering beneath the surface. Inside the Hood household, the warmth of roasting turkey and spiced pies filled the air, masking the meticulous planning Alex had poured into this day. The table was set with precision, every silver fork and crystal glass gleaming under the soft glow of the chandelier. Each place setting held more than plates and napkins. Tucked discreetly beneath each guest's napkin was an envelope that could shatter lives. Alex moved through the house with quiet efficiency, his every action measured. He greeted Marissa with a calm smile as she tied her apron, her face flushed with the pride of hosting what she believed would be another successful family gathering. "Everything's perfect," she remarked, placing the final touches on the table. He murmured a vague agreement, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. She looked radiant, confident, even innocent. The thought made his stomach churn. Guests began arriving shortly after noon. Bruce and Krista were the first to step through the door, their polished smiles firmly in place. Bruce handed Alex an expensive bottle of wine, his handshake firm and confident, a man utterly unaware of the reckoning to come. Caroline followed soon after, her usual grace barely masking the subtle air of control she always carried. Other guests, including Marissa's colleagues and family friends, trickled in, filling the room with laughter and conversation. Despite the convivial atmosphere, Alex felt the tension building like a coiled spring. Every smile, every polite exchange felt like part of a play in which only he knew the ending. He watched Marissa glide effortlessly between guests, laughing at Bruce's jokes, her charm lighting up the room. Caroline poured wine with practiced ease, doting on the children while ensuring everything appeared seamless. To anyone else, it was a picture-perfect Thanksgiving. As the guests took their seats, Alex stood at the head of the table, raising his glass for the customary toast. His voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. "Before we begin," he said, "I've prepared something for each of you. You'll find an envelope under your napkin. Please, take a moment to read." The rustling of paper replaced the hum of conversation as the guests opened their envelopes. Alex remained standing, his eyes scanning the room, watching as understanding and shock dawned on their faces. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the warmth of the room replaced by a suffocating tension. This was the moment Alex had prepared for, the calm giving way to the storm. The room was silent but for the sound of tearing paper and the rustling of envelopes. Alex remained standing at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, as his gaze swept across the faces of his guests. One by one, their reactions began to unfold. Krista's sharp gasp was the first to break the silence. Her hand flew to her mouth, the incriminating photograph spilling onto the table before her. "Bruce," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is this?" Bruce, seated beside her, paled as he scanned the documents in his own envelope. The DNA test results, bank statements, and surveillance photos painted a damning picture. His carefully composed demeanor cracked, and he turned toward Alex, his voice a mixture of anger and panic. "Alex, what is this supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means," Alex said coldly, his calm cutting through the room like a blade. 15 years, Bruce. 15 years of lies, betrayal, and theft. Consider this your reckoning. Marissa, seated across the table, clutched her envelope tightly, her knuckles white. Her face drained of color as she skimmed the contents, her carefully crafted facade crumbling. "Alex, please," she started, her voice quivering. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Alex snapped, his composure faltering for the first time. "That you've spent our entire marriage lying to me? That you let me believe I was raising my own children while you and Bruce played house behind my back?" Marissa's lips parted, but no words came. Caroline, seated beside her, intervened, her voice firm but tinged with desperation. "Alex, I only ever wanted what was best for you. You have to understand." "Best for me?" Alex cut her off, his voice rising. He pointed at the damning email correspondence included in Caroline's envelope. "These weren't the actions of someone who wanted the best for me, Mother. You manipulated my entire life to suit your vision of what it should be. You chose Bruce. You chose Marissa. You didn't care about me. You cared about control." Caroline's composure faltered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "No," Alex said, his tone final. "You were protecting your own narrative, at my expense." Across the table, Krista had risen to her feet, her hands trembling as she clutched the photos of Bruce and Marissa together at Caroline's beach house. "All these years," she said, her voice breaking, "you made me feel like I was the one who wasn't enough. Meanwhile, you..." She turned to Bruce, her fury palpable. "You were building a second family right under my nose." "Krista, please," Bruce began, his tone pleading, but she cut him off with a slap that echoed through the room. "Don't you dare," she spat. "Don't you dare try to justify this." The children, seated at the far end of the table, looked on in confusion and growing dread. Thomas, the eldest, broke the silence among them. "Dad?" he said hesitantly, his voice quivering. "What's going on?" Alex turned to his children, his heart breaking at their innocence. "I think it's time for you three to go upstairs," he said gently. "This isn't something you need to hear." Emma hesitated, her auburn hair catching the light as she searched Alex's face. "Dad?" "Emma," Alex interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "Please. I promise I'll explain everything later. Right now, I need you to trust me." Reluctantly, the children left the room, their footsteps echoing on the stairs. The moment they were gone, the tension in the dining room boiled over. Marissa leaned forward, tears streaming down her face. "Alex, I was trapped. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me." Alex's laugh was bitter, hollow. "You hurt me every day for 15 years, Marissa. Every smile, every kiss, every moment we shared was a lie. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed the life we built together. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice barely audible. But it did, Alex replied, his tone icy. And now you have to live with the consequences. Caroline reached out as if to comfort him, but he stepped back, the gesture cutting her more deeply than words ever could. I don't need your excuses, Mother. I don't need your apologies. You betrayed me as much as they did. Bruce finally found his voice, his earlier confidence now reduced to a desperate plea. Alex, we can fix this. You're blowing this out of proportion. Fix this? Alex's voice rose, his fury barely contained. You don't fix 15 years of betrayal, Bruce. You don't fix the kind of damage you've done. Krista's voice sliced through the room again, cold and unyielding. Don't expect me to stand by you this time, Bruce. I'll see to it that you lose everything, just like you've taken everything from me. The weight of her words hung in the air, a harbinger of the fallout to come. Marissa sat in stunned silence, her tears pooling on the table. Caroline looked smaller than Alex had ever seen her, her once commanding presence reduced to a frail shadow. Alex's gaze swept across them all, Marissa, Bruce, Caroline, even Krista, and for the first time he felt a sense of clarity. The ties that had bound him to this life were gone, severed by their actions. What remained was a determination to move forward, to rebuild not what had been, but something new. I'm leaving, he announced, his voice calm but resolute. I've already made arrangements. The children's futures are secure. As for the rest of you, you'll have to live with what you've done. Marissa sobbed openly, but Alex didn't waver. He turned and left the room, the sound of his footsteps fading into the silence. Upstairs, he checked on the children, each of them asleep despite the chaos below. He lingered for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face before retreating to his office. As he sat in the familiar leather chair, the weight of the evening settled on him. The family he had once cherished was gone, shattered beyond repair. But beneath the pain was a quiet resolve. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something new, something stronger. And as the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within, Alex allowed himself a moment of grief before turning his gaze forward, toward the future he would forge on his own terms. The weeks following Thanksgiving were a blur of meticulous planning for Alex. Every decision, every step, was executed with precision, as though he were dismantling the remnants of his old life piece by piece. He had no intention of staying in Millbrook, a place now steeped in the bitterness of betrayal. Instead, he resolved to vanish entirely, leaving nothing but a legacy of truth and security for his children. The first step was selling his company. Alex worked quietly behind the scenes, engaging a trusted intermediary to handle the negotiations. The deal was swift but thorough, ensuring that his employees were protected and that the company would thrive under its new ownership. When the final papers were signed, Alex felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The company he had built from the ground up was no longer his, but it was the price of freedom. With the financial arrangements complete, he turned his attention to his most personal task, writing letters to his children. Late one night, in the solitude of his office, Alex began with Thomas. It seemed he wasn't the first one this day to answer his mail order. "Dear Thomas," he wrote, his pen moving steadily despite the ache in his chest. He repeated the process for Emma and Lucas, tailoring each letter to their personalities and future hopes. Emma's letter spoke of her grace and creativity, Lucas's of his curiosity and potential. By dawn, the letters were sealed and entrusted to Miranda Hughes, who promised to deliver them when the time was right. The final step was severing all remaining ties. Alex closed his accounts, sold the house, and disposed of anything that might connect him to Millbrook. His flight to Singapore was booked under a new identity, carefully crafted to ensure a clean break. As he boarded the plane, Alex looked back one last time, the town fading into the distance. Ahead lay a new life, a blank slate where he could rebuild free from the weight of the past. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. In the sprawling cityscape of Singapore, Alex Hood began his transformation. The city's modern skyline, illuminated by shimmering lights that danced across Marina Bay, mirrored the blank slate Alex had sought. He arrived with nothing but determination and the remnants of a shattered past, ready to rebuild himself from the ground up. The first step was physical. Alex embraced a discipline he had long neglected. Early mornings found him in a secluded dojo, practicing martial arts under the guidance of a master who spoke little but demanded precision. Each punch, kick, and movement became a metaphor for his journey. Controlled, deliberate, and purposeful. The routines honed his body, chiseling away the softness of his former self and replacing it with lean strength. The sweat and strain became a release, a way to channel the pain of betrayal into something tangible. By the end of his first year in Singapore, his reflection in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. A man sharpened by resolve. Emotionally, Alex sought solace in solitude and structure. He traded the quiet chaos of Millbrook for the methodical rhythm of his new life. Therapy sessions, though difficult at first, allowed him to confront the anger and grief he had carried. His therapist once told him, "Transformation is not about forgetting who you were. It's about deciding who you want to be." The words resonated deeply, becoming a mantra he repeated on sleepless nights. Slowly, Alex began to let go, not of the love for his children, but of the bitterness tethered to his past. Professionally, Alex's rise was nothing short of meteoric. He founded Hood Innovations, a company that married his expertise in software development with emerging technologies like blockchain and AI. His approach was relentless but inspired. Every product reflected his new ethos of transparency and integrity. Under his leadership, Hood Innovations grew into a dominant force in the tech industry, reshaping supply chain management across Asia. Keynote speeches at tech conferences became his stage, where he shared his philosophy with an audience eager to learn. "Success is not built on avoiding failure," he said at one event, his voice steady. "It's built on learning from it and rebuilding with purpose." Though his days were filled with meetings and innovation, his nights often carried a quiet loneliness. He would sit by the large windows of his penthouse overlooking the city, sipping green tea, his thoughts drifting to Thomas, Emma, and Lucas. The letters he had left behind were not just words. They were promises. He hoped that one day, when they were ready, they might understand why he had chosen to leave, and that they might seek him out. As the years passed, Alex became a symbol of resilience in the tech world. Yet, within him, a quiet yearning remained. Regret for the life he had lost, but hope for the life he was building. His transformation wasn't an erasure of the past. It was a declaration that he would not be defined by it. Each step forward was both a goodbye to what had been and a promise to himself of what could be. A decade later, Alex Hood's return to Millbrook was marked not by fanfare, but by quiet transformation. The once thriving town he had left behind had grown weathered in his absence. Main Street, once bustling with activity, now bore the scars of economic stagnation. Shuttered storefronts, peeling paint, and faded signs hinting at a community struggling to hold on to its past. Yet, for all its decline, Alex saw potential, a chance to rebuild, not only for himself, but for the town that had shaped him. From the tinted windows of his Bentley, Alex observed the familiar landmarks. The Victorian houses, the park where his children had played, even the old Hood residence, all seemed smaller now, worn by time. But Alex himself had changed. The man who stepped out of the car outside Millbrook Tech Park was nothing like the one who had fled years ago. His tailored suit, sharp eyes, and composed demeanor spoke of success, resilience, and a life rebuilt. The tech park, his first acquisition upon returning, was a shadow of its former self. Once a hub of innovation, it had fallen into disrepair, its neglected grounds overrun with weeds. Yet, under Alex's leadership, the site was already stirring to life. modernizing the infrastructure while banners bearing the Hood Innovations logo promised a brighter future. Millbrook would rise again, but this time on Alex's terms. It didn't take long for word of Alex's return to spread. Marisa was the first to reach out, requesting a meeting at her modest clinic on the outskirts of town. When Alex arrived, she greeted him with nervous energy, her once polished appearance dulled by years of struggle. The clinic, a far cry from the prestigious hospital she once commanded, mirrored her diminished circumstances. "Alex," she began, her voice wavering, "thank you for coming." He regarded her with the same measured calm he had perfected over the years. "I'm here to listen, Marisa. Speak." She hesitated, wringing her hands. I wanted to apologize for everything. I made terrible choices, and I know I've hurt you more than I can ever repair." Alex's expression remained impassive. "You're right, you can't repair it." Her breath hitched, but she pressed on. "I've tried to rebuild, for the children, for myself. I wanted you to know I regret it all. Every day." There was no anger in Alex's reply, only a quiet firmness. "Your regret is for you to carry. My concern has always been the children, and they seem to have turned out well despite everything." Marisa's tears spilled over, but Alex didn't waver. He had moved beyond her long ago, and this conversation, for him, was closure, not reconciliation. Caroline, too, sought him out. She arrived unannounced at the tech park, her once commanding presence reduced to a shadow of itself. Alex allowed her into his office more out of obligation than desire. "Alexander," she began, her voice trembling, "I've come to ask for forgiveness. I was wrong to interfere in your life, to think I knew what was best." Alex leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "You didn't think, Mother. You acted. You chose control over honesty, and you paid the price for it." Her eyes filled with tears. "I lost everything. My place in the community, the respect of my grandchildren, even my relationship with you. I just want a chance to make things right." "Some things can't be made right," Alex replied evenly. "But I've ensured you'll never be without support. That's all I can offer." Caroline left his office looking smaller than when she arrived, the weight of her choices heavy on her shoulders. For Alex, it was another tie severed, another chapter closed. The most meaningful encounter came days later, when Thomas, Emma, and Lucas visited Alex at the tech park. Now adults, they carried themselves with the confidence of individuals who had weathered challenges and emerged stronger. Thomas, at 24, had joined Hood Innovations, proving his mettle through hard work. Emma, 22, had blossomed into a poised artist, her grace matched by a quiet strength. Lucas, at 19, was a prodigy in his own right, already pursuing innovative blockchain projects. "Dad," Thomas began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "we've missed you." Alex's heart swelled, though he remained composed. "I've missed you too," he said, his voice soft. "I've followed your lives from a distance, but it's good to see you in person." Emma stepped forward, her gaze searching his. "Why did you stay away so long? Why not tell us sooner?" Alex hesitated, then replied with honesty. "I thought you deserved a childhood free of the burden of what your mother and I went through. I wanted you to grow into who you were meant to be, without my shadow hanging over you." Lucas, always the most analytical, nodded. "And now? Why come back?" "Because it was time," Alex said simply. "Time to reconnect. Time to rebuild." The conversation flowed naturally after that, laughter mingling with shared memories. For the first time in years, Alex felt a deep sense of belonging, not to the past, but to the future they could build together. Under Alex's guidance, the tech park became the heart of Millbrook's revival. State-of-the-art facilities attracted top talent, while partnerships with local businesses brought new life to the community. The once abandoned storefronts on Main Street filled with cafes, boutiques, and startups. Alex also funded scholarships for local students, ensuring that Millbrook's youth had opportunities he had once lacked. The community's gratitude was palpable. Alex, however, remained focused on his mission. For him, this wasn't about redemption, it was about progress. He had no intention of reclaiming his old life. Instead, he was building something entirely new. As the sun set over the rejuvenated tech park, Alex stood on the rooftop garden, watching the lights of Millbrook twinkle below. His children joined him, their presence a reminder of all he had fought for and all he had gained. "You've done something amazing here," Emma said, her voice filled with admiration. Alex smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We've done it together, and this is just the beginning." In that moment, the contrast between the man Alex had been and the man he had become was stark. He had transformed pain into purpose, betrayal into resilience, and loss into legacy. Millbrook, once a symbol of his downfall, now stood as a testament to his strength and vision, a beacon of hope for the future. Marissa's life had been reduced to a fraction of what it once was. Gone were the elegant dinner parties and the prestige of her position at Millbrook General. Now she worked in a small, overburdened clinic on the edge of town, treating minor ailments and managing endless paperwork. The clinic walls, decorated with outdated posters and sterile white paint, were a stark contrast to her once lavish office. Her patients were polite but indifferent, unaware of the life she once led. Each day, Marissa carried the weight of regret. The looks of her children, now adults, were the heaviest burden. They visited occasionally, out of duty rather than affection, their conversations polite but distant. Emma, with her unyielding grace, often spoke with a tone of quiet disappointment. Thomas, ever the pragmatist, limited his words to the necessary. Lucas, though respectful, rarely stayed long. The guilt was unrelenting, compounded by the knowledge that Alex, whom she had betrayed so deeply, had become the anchor in their lives. He had succeeded in ways she couldn't imagine, building a legacy that her choices had nearly destroyed. Marissa's clinic work was a meager penance, and though she tried to reconcile her past, the damage was irreparable. Bruce, once the charismatic financial advisor with a perfect smile, now worked as a mid-level accountant at Hood Innovations. The irony wasn't lost on him. The company he now served had been built by the man he betrayed. His cubicle, small and impersonal, was a constant reminder of how far he had fallen. Each morning he clocked in, avoiding the glances of younger, ambitious colleagues who had heard whispers of his past. His personal life was equally bleak. Krista, his ex-wife, had left him with nothing but the clothes he packed in haste. Their divorce was swift and merciless, leaving him with no significant assets and no social standing. Attempts to reconnect with his children were met with indifference, and he often dined alone in his one-bedroom apartment, the silence deafening. Caroline fared no better. She lived in a modest retirement home, far from the grand estate where she had once entertained Millbrook's elite. Her room was small, sparsely decorated with faded family photos and a few cherished trinkets. The staff was kind but distant, and the other residents treated her as just another tenant, unaware of her former influence. Estranged from her grandchildren, Caroline found herself alone in her twilight years. The choices she had made to control Alex's life had cost her everything: her family, her reputation, and her dignity. She spent her days in quiet reflection, replaying the moments that led to her downfall. The letters from her grandchildren, when they came, were brief and formal, devoid of warmth. Alex, though dutiful in providing for her financial needs, remained resolutely distant. In stark contrast to their biological parents, Thomas, Emma, and Lucas had flourished under Alex's mentorship and the stability provided by their trust funds. Thomas, now a rising star in Hood Innovations, had earned his place as director of operations through hard work and determination. He often sought Alex's advice, their relationship built on mutual respect and shared values. No longer just a father figure, Alex had become a mentor, a role model for the kind of man Thomas aspired to be. Emma had carved her own path as a leader in the arts community. Her therapeutic movement program for trauma survivors had gained national recognition, blending her love for dance with a deep empathy for others. She often consulted Alex for strategic advice, valuing his perspective on building something meaningful from adversity. Lucas, the youngest, had inherited Alex's sharp intellect and drive for innovation. At just 24, he had already spearheaded groundbreaking projects in blockchain technology, earning accolades within the tech world. Though he worked within Hood Innovations, Lucas's contributions stood on their own merit, untainted by nepotism. His bond with Alex had grown deeper, their conversations ranging from technology to philosophy, each interaction further strengthening their connection. Despite their successes, the siblings maintained a careful but distant relationship with Marissa and Bruce. They acknowledged their biological parents' attempts to rebuild their lives, but chose to center their own around Alex's values of integrity and perseverance. For them, Alex wasn't just a father in name. He was the one who had shaped their futures, teaching them the power of resilience. Alex Hood had become a symbol of triumph over adversity. Hood Innovations, now a global powerhouse, was not just a tech company. It was a testament to Alex's journey. The company's ethos of transparency and integrity reflected his own values, resonating with employees and clients alike. The tech park in Millbrook had transformed the town into a thriving hub of innovation, attracting talent from across the country and revitalizing the local economy. Beyond business, Alex's impact extended into the community. He funded scholarships for underprivileged students, created mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs, and invested in infrastructure that brought new life to Millbrook. His presence was no longer a reminder of the town's scandals, but a beacon of its transformation. Despite his success, Alex remained grounded. He divided his time between Millbrook and Singapore, maintaining the balance that had defined his new life. His evenings were often spent in quiet reflection, gazing out over the landscapes he had helped reshape, a cup of green tea in hand. On particularly poignant days, Alex would visit the rooftop garden of Hood Innovations headquarters, where he often met with his children. Together they would discuss their futures, share successes, and occasionally reflect on the past. For Alex, these moments were his true legacy, not the buildings or the wealth, but the relationships he had rebuilt with honesty and love. Millbrook, once a town mired in stagnation, now thrived under Alex's influence. The tech park, with its modern architecture and bustling energy, stood as a symbol of progress. Local businesses flourished, schools were better funded, and families had new opportunities. Alex's name was spoken with admiration, his story a reminder of how resilience could transform not only a life, but an entire community. As Alex walked through the tech park one autumn afternoon, the golden leaves crunching underfoot, he paused to watch a group of young professionals brainstorming outside one of the innovation hubs. Their energy and optimism mirrored his own when he first began his journey. For a moment, he allowed himself a quiet smile. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had been repurposed, transformed into the foundation of something far greater. Alex's triumph wasn't just in his personal success, but in the lives he had touched, the community he had rebuilt, and the family he had chosen to nurture. In the end, Alex Hood's story wasn't one of revenge. It was a story of resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of choice. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as families gathered to celebrate the graduates. Alex Hood sat near the front row, surrounded by Thomas and Emma, their smiles reflecting the pride they all felt for Lucas. The youngest of Alex's children had achieved something remarkable, graduating at the top of his class with a degree in blockchain innovation, a field he had already begun to revolutionize. As the ceremony progressed, Alex's thoughts drifted, weaving together the themes that had defined his journey. Betrayal had once consumed Alex, leaving him adrift in the wreckage of the life he thought he had built. The lies of those closest to him, Marissa, Bruce, even Caroline, had threatened to destroy not just his family, but his very identity. Yet, in the depths of that despair, Alex found the seeds of resilience. Betrayal, he realized, was not the end. It was the challenge, a test of his ability to rise above the pain and rebuild. He didn't allow the bitterness to define him. Instead, he turned it into fuel, channeling his hurt into the creation of something stronger, a legacy of integrity, purpose, and hope. The betrayal had taught him that strength wasn't about avoiding pain, but facing it head-on and finding a way to thrive despite it. Through his choices, Alex had proven that integrity could triumph over deception. He built Hood Innovations not on shortcuts or manipulation, but on transparency and honesty. His company stood as a beacon of what was possible when one chose to act with intention and principle. This same integrity guided his relationships, especially with his children. Despite their parentage, Alex never wavered in his love for them. He made the deliberate choice to be the father they needed, showing them through his actions that family wasn't defined by blood, but by the values and bonds they chose to uphold. For Alex, family became a concept reimagined through the lens of his journey. It was no longer about who shared his DNA or who was present at the beginning of his life. Family was the group of people who stood by one another, who built each other up and shared in one another's triumphs and failures. It was a connection forged through trust, respect, and love. His relationship with Thomas, Emma, and Lucas epitomized this new understanding. Each of them had found their own paths, but returned to Alex, not out of obligation, but because they valued the man he had become. In choosing to follow his example, they redefined their family as one built on resilience and mutual respect. As Lucas walked across the stage to accept his diploma, the applause was thunderous. Alex's chest swelled with pride, his hands clapping louder than anyone else's. Lucas turned to the audience, his eyes searching until they found Alex. He smiled, the gesture carrying more weight than words ever could. After the ceremony, they gathered outside under the golden glow of the setting sun. Lucas approached Alex, holding his diploma tightly. "This is as much yours as it is mine," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "You taught me everything I needed to get here." Alex shook his head, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "No, Lucas," he replied. "You earned this. I just showed you what was possible." "Hey guys." Thomas and Emma joined them, and for a moment the four stood together, a family not bound by blood, but by choice. Alex looked at his children, adults now, each embodying the values he had fought to instill, and felt a profound sense of peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Alex reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The betrayal that had once shattered him now seemed like a distant memory, a chapter in a story of resilience and transformation. He had built a life of purpose and integrity, one that extended beyond himself to touch his family and community. In the end, Alex had found something greater than revenge or restitution. He had found fulfillment. His legacy wasn't just in the buildings he had constructed or the companies he had built, but in the lives he had changed, starting with his own. For Alex Hood, the journey wasn't over, but he no longer feared what lay ahead. He had faced the worst and emerged stronger, ready to continue building a future defined not by what was lost, but by what was gained. And for the first time in years, as he laughed with his children under the fading light, he felt truly happy.